Hey everybody, KC here. So you may not know this, but January 2025 is the first annual Store Brands Month, and it's on all the calendars right now. And this is sort of interesting. I was curious why it happened now for the first time. Store brands have been around for a long time, and I really wanted to talk to someone about the whole notion of store brands, not just within the context of this particular promotion, but sort of in a larger sense. I'm curious about the opportunities. I'm curious about the things that may be inhibiting retailers from taking advantage of the opportunity. And so I reached out to Clay Dockery, who is the co-chairman of the Store Brand Month Committee at PLMA, the Private Label Manufacturers Association. And he agreed to talk to me for Morning Newsbeat to talk a little bit about, what's the white space that exists and what's the best way the business can attack that and exploit it and take greater advantage of the opportunities that private label offers. So I hope you enjoy my conversation with Clay Dockery. Clay Dockery, welcome to Morning Newsbeat.
Thank you. Great to be here.
It's always great when I have people. I don't think I'm telling you any secrets, but you're a longtime reader of Morning Newsbeat, so it's so great when I get a chance to put people who've been reading it for a long time on the site. I know I get emails from you a lot, which is great. So
many decades of watching, and it's informative, and I've enjoyed the video content, the articles. It's a great way to start the day.
I wasn't fishing for a compliment. Thank you. So we're here to talk about the fact that this is January 2025 is the very first store brand month.
That's correct.
So it's official. It's in all the official calendars. So private label, own label has been around for a long, long time. What was the impetus behind wanting to do this?
There's one real simple reason, and several of us were talking within the industry, within different categories, about the fact that there are some large CPG companies that have products that have market basket affinity. And as we talked about that, the largest brand in the grocery store is obviously the retailer's own brand. Mm-hmm. And so we had this eye-opening moment of how could we build market basket affinity through promotional activity. And in the private label industry, manufacturers tend to have their category blinders on. So this was really a way for us to say, if collaboration becomes a key component within the private label industry amongst the manufacturers and connectivity with retailers, we can really escalate the private brand business.
When you say have their category blinders on, does that mean when people are buying for private label, they tend to think of those products within the private label portfolio as opposed to being part of the cereal, cookie, ketchup, condiment, whatever portfolio? I mean, how are they thinking? Is that what you mean by that?
Well, it's an interesting follow-up question, because really I was referencing the manufacturer. Right. We as manufacturers look deeply into our categories. We understand our categories, but we're not collaborating with other manufacturers. From a consumer perspective, it's an even more interesting dynamic, because household penetration of private label is well over 90%, but the share of market in terms of units is just over 20%. So there is this huge opportunity to increase the number of private label items in a market basket through this collaborative approach to items that have, again, basket affinity.
When you talk about collaboration within the industry, are you talking about who are you aiming this at? Are you aiming at this at retailers to put out promotions to promote their private label? Are you aiming it at manufacturers to promote more of their private label to retailers? What are you targeting right now? I mean, with the assumption that the eventual target is always the consumer.
Sure. And so if you think about over the course of the year, when Memorial Day comes, you have your first big backyard cookout promotional activity. You have holiday baking. You have all of these thematic events that national brands execute with great capability. And again, if you talk about some of these companies, Kraft Heinz has a cluster of products that would fit into a backyard barbecue promotion. The retailer has the same thing, but they have traditionally ceded the thematic events to the national brands. So as we were talking about this as an opportunity, January is a month that you're coming out of the holidays. You probably are a little focused on saving money following all of the holiday spending. You're trying to get back to basics. And so it seemed like a month that was just a very practical opportunity to say, let's drive some theme merchandising activity, a football gathering, as an example.
Right.
There are just numerous events that you could target.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, we're certainly going to come into a lot of national brand promotions and advertising around the Super Bowl.
Yes,
But early, I mean, there's a little bit less of it now. So this is actually you're probably right. This is a good moment to kind of get in under the radar a little bit with a focus on national brand. And I think you're also right that when you think about what national brands do, you're right. Kraft Heinz is gonna grab onto Memorial Day, Fourth of July, and Labor Day, right? They're gonna build around that.
absolutely.
But June 10th, July 17th, August 10th, um, those would be dates where people are eating as many hamburgers, hot dogs, whatever, or close to as many, but they're not building promotions around that. So those are the times when a strong national brand kind of push could actually move the needle a little bit, I would think.
Oh, you're absolutely right. And I think it's important to note that while we are designating January as Store Brand Month and it has become an official calendar-oriented event, that doesn't mean that we want to shelve the other 11
Right.
months
Right.
of merchandising opportunity, because there are opportunities. And the national brand support has to continue. It has to be part of every retailer's strategy. There's no question about that. But there are opportunities again to build themes, to build reasons to purchase. And we all know that the purposeful shopping trip is different from just a quick fill-in. If you are operating around a theme, you're going to be purchasing more products to support that theme. And
Yeah.
this is again where we know again that 20% share, 90% household penetration is a core opportunity, because what it says is that there are categories that are more highly developed and categories that are underdeveloped. And if you get one purchase of a category that a consumer hasn't previously purchased, with the quality that exists within private brand today, there's no question that you would enter into a repurchase cycle.
Is it fair to say that, I mean, we know Europe has a much deeper private label penetration, right? They're much stronger in private label in Europe.
About 2x, yes.
Right. So, and I'm trying to figure out if X equals Y, does that equal Z? If you already know that 90% of the country is buying the country's households are buying private label, and they represent roughly 1 out of every 5 products that they buy, and actually works out to roughly around 1 every $5 that is spent. I mean, it's not exactly the same, but it's close.
Yes.
That when you talk about opportunity, it's more about, is it more about the industry, and I'm really talking retailers here, not hammering this and not working this the way they should, because clearly people are open to it, people like it, people are spending 20 cents on the dollar on it. So the only thing that's blocking the US from, maybe not the only thing, but one of the big things blocking the US from the kind of private label distribution that they have in Europe is retailers not getting the job done. Am I painting with too broad a brush?
I would say yes.
What do you want to say?
I think that there are multiple dynamics that come into play. Europe has a higher penetration of the extreme discount operations, and so we know that from Germany, we've seen Aldi come into the States, and they're now a top 10 retailer with virtually all private brand. The share that the extreme discounters, the Aldis and Lidls have in the States is lower. And we also know that there is something called trade promotion funding
Right.
that doesn't exist much within the private label world, but is certainly a key component of the national brands.
And often
And
is regulated against in Europe, if I'm not
yes,
mistaken, right? There are things they won't let them do in Europe that people do here routinely.
absolutely. So a retailer is not going to give up on the trade funding that the national brands provide to grow their business. So I think that there is and again, we see private brand merchandising support. It is there. But what isn't there is again, the thematic approach, I'm going to wrap 5 products, 10 products, 12 products around a particular event and try to get the consumer to buy it. We do see some events where if you buy X number of private label items, you get a discount, but it's not storytelling. And storytelling is where the opportunity is growing, particularly with social media being such a prevalent component of the shopping experience today.
Well, and that's why when I amended my question, not to say that I didn't want to say the only inhibitor, but one of the only inhibitors, because you're absolutely right. That check that a lot of retailers get every month from for promotions or slotting allowances or whatever it happens to be is a big component as well. But it's interesting to me because I mean, clearly the likes of Lidl and Aldi and Trader Joe's have their business model is built around the idea that we're not going to depend on promotion money. We're not going to depend on slotting allowances, and we can build a perfectly respectable business out of that. And I think in the case of Aldi and Lidl, and certainly Aldi is ahead of the game on this one. Yeah, they're building a respectable business. They don't have a lot of big market share now, but history would suggest that that could change, right? And I mean, a lot of it depends on the economy and things like that. But whatever their market share is now, it's not unlikely and certainly not impossible that 10 years from now, people will wake up and say, wait a minute, when did they double their market share? I mean, that happens. Well, I started writing about this industry. Walmart didn't sell groceries. So
Right.
things are capable of change.
Well, and I think that change is absolutely underway. Aldi, I remember a conference many years ago where the conversation was the fact that retailers tended to not pay any attention to Aldi because they would only get a 4 or 5 share in a market.
Right.
The reality is that they were playing the long game, and they were saying a 5 share in multiple markets is going to make us a powerful player. And they are now the 9th largest retailer in the US. So that transition has occurred, and they are continuing to open stores. Trader Joe's is continuing to open stores, and consumer acceptance, you're absolutely right. It is very strong for those private label centric retailers.
Well, and I don't want to go down this rabbit hole, but yeah, when Kroger and Albertsons were talking about merging, they talked about Walmart, Costco, and Amazon, but they also had their eyes in the rearview mirror at Aldi and Lidl, saying, okay, and frankly Dollar General, but that's a different kettle of fish because they're coming up from behind. So
Yes.
they felt the squeeze, and they felt they needed to make a move. So let's back up a second. So we've already talked about the idea that if roughly 1 in 5 items sold at retail in food retail are private label, right? And roughly one of every $5 spent at retail is on own label, right? I mean, again, it's not precise, but it's around there. And then on those products, I'm just trying to figure out the math. So if on those products, I think it's fair to assume the margin is greater, right? The
Yes.
profits are greater. Although, I'm sure retailers wouldn't want to talk about how much greater. But if the margin is greater and they're making more money, is it at least conceivable that if you started to compare, really do a deep dive on the numbers, that, yeah, retailers get that check monthly, quarterly, whatever, from a manufacturer in terms of some kind of promotion money. But if you added up if you looked at the margin they were making on private label, yeah, they're not getting a promotion check, but in fact, they're making more money. They could be making more money, and if they had doubled their private label presentation, might do a lot better than than they do in promotion money. Is it conceivable that if retailers are not talking are not willing to step away from the promotion money? I'll say this, you wouldn't say it because they're addicted to heroin. And I mean, nobody's going to be surprised to hear me say that because I've been addicted forever. But is it possible that it's just because people haven't really done the math? And if they really did, the math is the math. And if they did the math, they might find out that, yeah, it's nice to get that check monthly, quarterly, whatever. But in fact, in terms of the long-term profitability and of our business that we want to differentiate, it would make a lot more sense to focus on national brand, on private label.
Well, I think
is that a crazy construct?
It's
As I admit that there are no numbers in front of
me. Yeah, it's not crazy by any means, but it is the holy grail of knowledge that any manufacturer would like to have.
Right.
I don't know that even retailers have a construct that takes into consideration is in-store labor in terms of building displays from a national brand part of the component. Slotting, does that figure in over the course of a year? Trade promotional dollars, certainly that investment is real, but we certainly see in a lot of instances that the list price of products on a national brand basis are subsidized on an everyday basis. So it is a very interesting reality that private label is only about 50 years old in the US. It came around in the 70s during a very difficult financial time. And at the birth of private label, it was generic back then, and it was just the black and white. Some really went out on the edge with yellow on the label, and price was the only component of the value proposition. Today, the value proposition is price, quality, and innovation. So I think that retailers are always looking at balance. In conversations I've had with retailers over the years, they do have targets for increasing private brand penetration. So it is real that they want to do it. And I assume they want to do that for purposes of profitability. But there's a very distinct line that retailers and manufacturers don't cross in terms of sharing that level of information.
I guess if I want Morning Newsbeat readers, viewers to come away from this conversation with anything, it's like just to ask internally, have we done the math on this? In other words, have we done the math in a way that we really know, at least internally, where the profit whether or not we could be doing better in terms of profit if we try to double our private label distribution and become less dependent on national brands. And my national brands readers and viewers are going crazy right now. And by the way, it also may be, I would suspect, it's possible I'm going to get 20 emails from tomorrow saying, you're an idiot. Of course we do that math. But I'm betting that it's possible I get those emails, but I wouldn't bet on it. We'll see. We'll see.
It will be interesting because I believe that private brand is still a profit driver, right, for the industry. Otherwise, they wouldn't have growth targets, right, necessarily. And the other reality is, in a sea of choices for consumers to shop, the one differentiating characteristic is their own brand. So that has become significant and to the forefront for retailers to say, this is where I have exclusivity. This is where I can make a difference. And that's why innovation has become so prevalent. That's why multi-tiered brand strategies has become the primary course of action for most retailers around the country.
Well, listen, I mean, if I've written anything in Morning News Beat over and over the years, and there's a bunch of things I have, it's that where you're going to be successful is where you differentiate yourself. Companies are rarely going to find success just doing the same thing and selling the same products that the guy across the street or down the road does. And private label is a perfect example of that.
Absolutely. And it sounds like you're going to be following up with your often stated compete as a verb.
There you go. Yeah, the man's been reading. Okay, last question. I'll let you go. I know it's anecdotal. It's early in January. Have you gotten good response, at least anecdotally at this point, from the industry in terms of what you're seeing in terms of promotion of private label?
We've seen some very, very exciting commitments, and this was a unique, and I certainly should share that the Private Label Manufacturers Association was the driver in creating Store Brand Month. That this would not be possible without the association getting behind it. But it was an interesting moment because the committee that brought this to life was made up of manufacturers and retailers and service providers. And I've been involved in PLMA for many, many years. And this was the first time that we had that many different organizations involved in bringing this to life. So the retailers have been very engaged in the conversation. If we had started with, boy, that's a dumb idea, we do private label, and they didn't think that there was any value in this proposition, it would have never come to life. So I think we're going to see a lot of activity. We elected a month versus a week because we know that there has to be some national brand support. We can't dominate one week and take away all those trade promotion dollars. So again, we've pushed on the fact that you have an infinite number of themes available when your product is sold wall to wall in a grocery store. And retailers that I've talked with are extremely enthusiastic about it, and I'm looking forward to seeing a lot of the support. We have already started to see retailers breaking ads this week.
Yeah. Well, that's great. And listen, to close on something you said earlier, yeah, I mean, the month is important, but it has to be a foundation for a building that has to be erected over a period of 11 other months, right?
Absolutely.
It can't be a building that sits out on its own and is only out there, for 1 month a year.
You're absolutely right, Kevin. And our reality is that if we see market share development during this month, and we see products that have not previously been purchased, categories that haven't previously been purchased that move into the private brand space, we will see that growth and that additional 11 months of incremental sales volume.
Absolutely. Hey, Clay, thank you so much for doing this. I appreciate it. We talk a lot about differentiation on Morning Newsbeat, but we don't always drill down on the area of private label. So I'm glad you were able to shine a little light on it.
Thank you so much. I enjoyed it, Kevin.
Take care. Thanks.
Bye.